Hi and welcome to RC Nerd 74. In today's video I give you a short tutorial about how to 100% waterproofing your FPV quad. I already did a few experiments with waterproofing RC electronics and I always use liquid tape from Plasti Dip, which works perfect. The additional challenge you have if you waterproof FPV quad is that you have more components which are getting very hot, especially the VTX, but also the FC for freestyle or race quads are getting hot. And if you cover your electronics with Plasti Dip or any other waterproofing cover, the electronics will heat up more than regular. So what I tried is to only cover what's really needed to make it 100% waterproof. So let's go through the steps I did and have a look how this ended up. At the end of the video you can find a water check I did with the electronics, which I can tell you all right now, which was successful, and I'm pretty happy with the result, how the waterproofing went out. So first of all I had to remove a few parts. I took off the props, took off the velcros, the top plate, so I got access to all the electronics. To cover the electronics with Plasti Dip, I didn't unsolder a lot. The only thing I unsoldered were all the motor cables, and I have to modify the RC receiver, so I also had to unsolder the RC receiver from the cables. Everything else stayed soldered to all the cables you have on your FPV quad setup. To cover your electronics successfully, you have to have all clean electronics plates. So what I had to do with the RC receiver is to uncover the electronics plate from all the original shrink tube and wrapping, and also the heating element of the ESC I had to remove, just to make sure that I really close every little gap which can access water during a wet flight. On the RC receiver I also had to remove the stock servo pins, just to make it possible to solder the cables directly onto the electronics plate. Then I removed the FC, the ESC, the VTX, all from the bottom plate to make it possible to cover bottom and top side of the electronics, and the camera stayed on its place because I only had to cover the back side of the electronics plate you can see here. To make it a bit easier to remove the cooling plate from the ESC, I used my heat gun at around 200 degrees. Like this, it was pretty easy to remove the cooling plate without damaging the ESC. Then it was time to cover all top and bottom plates of the electronics. What I tried to do is to not cover all the FETs on the ESC, the processor on the FC, also the hottest elements on the camera and on the VTX too. So like this, I hope that also in summertime, when we have up to 30 degrees Celsius outside, the electronics won't get too hot and it will be fine to fly at high temperatures without getting any issues with the electronics temperatures. To protect the USB connector of the FC, I used the micro USB blind plug made of silicon. Just put it into the USB connector and covered the whole connector and the blind plug also with liquid tape, just to keep it in place and to make sure that no moisture will get access to the USB connector. After most of the covering was done, I resoldered the RC receiver cables and all the motor cables, and I also forgot to mention that I removed the cables which connect the FC and the ESC, the power cables. I also had to resolder the power cables to the FC, And after soldering back on all these cables, I also covered the soldering pads of all these cables. Then I used some shrink tube to cover the plastic dip of the RC receiver to make it possible to mount the RC receiver with double-sided tape on the top plate of the frame. The reason why I install it on the top plate is that I want to have as big as possible gap between the VTX and the RC receiver to avoid any distortion from the VTX to the RC receiver to get best possible RC signal on my RC receiver. As I already mentioned, the water test was absolutely successful. The only little thing I forgot to cover is the cable which you need to program your FPV camera. During the water test, there was some random pop-ups of the menus just because the two pins were connected with water and the camera went crazy. So after the water test, I also covered this cable, and now everything is perfect and 100% waterproof. So that's already all about the tutorial. Now let's jump into the water test footage. Thanks for watching, have a good time, happy flying, bye bye.